balance my reading between really macabre, gothic, scary, spooky death books and cozy fantasies. And then obviously I sprinkle in some smutty fantasy romance in there as well because we need to be balanced, okay? Our goal is to infiltrate and woo the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him and take over his kingdom. Hello, my gorgeous, wonderful angel bestie queens. I hope that you're having the most wonderful day of your entire stinking life. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. We're doing our monthly reset vlog. The agenda for today is to finish cleaning up a couple bits and bobs around the house. I'm not gonna lie, I did start cleaning and doing some stuff yesterday because this weekend, today's Thursday by the way, this weekend I'm doing a 48-hour romantasy readathon. So I wanted it to be super focused on reading, just like an ultimate reading weekend for myself. And so I am cleaning the house, I'm gonna go food shopping, we're gonna do all of the things today so that I don't have to feel guilty like, oh, I'm sitting down reading when I should be cleaning or doing the dishes or doing the laundry, blah, blah, blah. We're also gonna be talking about my September TBR in this video. I'm so excited. It's taken me a while to like curate what I want my September TBR to be. I think there's 12 on there. I have to do like a final run through before we talk about it because I feel like I'm forgetting a lot of books. And then we also have to do some bullet journal updates because my last video was my September bullet journal setup, which I will leave linked in the description box below if you would like to watch it. But we're going to be filling out some of those spreads, especially my TBR page, because I set it up in the last video, but I didn't actually fill it out because I was still deciding on my September TBR. So I hope that you're excited. If you are, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and let's reset for September. Hello, my friends. Okay, it's a little while later, a couple hours later. We got everything done that we wanted to get done today. And now we're gonna talk about my September TBR. I think I finally got it to the point where everything is included that needs to be. However, I don't know that I'm gonna be able to get to absolutely all of these books because there's like 14 books on here. There's 16 books. So the arc that I have for September is The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. This is an author, like when I got approved for this arc, I jumped for joy because I read her Keeper of Night series. Kylie Lee Baker writes the perfect, it's kind of like horror fantasy, but horror might be a little too intense, but it's just very dark and creepy, and I fell in love with her writing style. So in this book we follow Zilan or Zilan. I'm not sure how to say it. She wants to become a royal alchemist, but she's practicing illegal alchemy right now in her impoverished village in southern China. She is starting to get a reputation for resurrecting the dead for people for a price. When she finally has the opportunity to take her imperial exam, her reputation for resurrecting the dead follows her to the capital. The royal prince contacts her with a request to resurrect someone. Not only that, but she's now in this competition, which sounds like a deadly competition to become a royal alchemist against others who are very eager to get the title. And she's trying not to get caught up in the political games that the royal family is playing as well. So keep your eye out for this one. It comes out October 3rd, but I will absolutely let you know my thoughts. It'll probably be in a reading vlog. Next, we're moving on to my Libby holds. So the first one being Immortality by Dana Schwartz. This is the second book in the Anatomy, a Love Story duology, or I think it's called the Anatomy duology, but the first book was called Anatomy, a Love Story. This book came out in February and I've been meaning to get to it because I loved the first book so much. If you love a gothic writing style, if you love a very interesting, twisted love story that has some really dark elements, I think that you will love this book. So in the first book, we follow our main character, Hazel. This takes place in the 1800s, I want to say. And Hazel has this ambition. She doesn't just want to be a lady of high society. She wants to become a doctor, or a surgeon, more accurately. And this takes place at a time when surgery was just coming about as a field, and has a very creepy and borderline disturbing history, because what they used to do is dig up recent dead bodies and practice doing surgeries on them to learn about human anatomy. So Hazel's very well off. She's trying to become a surgeon, but it's not just immediately accepted by a field run by men and the schooling that's entirely run by men. She's being left out and she has to find her own means to study the surgical field to help people. And she befriends a resurrection man. Resurrection men are the people that were hired to dig up these recent dead bodies from the graveyards illegally and give them to these surgical students. It's a very interesting love story. It's super gothic. It has very macabre undertones. I loved it. I loved the twists. I thought that the plot was really good. The first book ends on a cliffhanger as well, so the second book picks up where the first one left off, and I've been meaning to get to it for so long. My next Libby hold is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is by Heather Fawcett. It is a very cozy fantasy, and there's no better time to read cozy fantasies than in autumn. I basically balance my reading between really macabre, gothic, scary, spooky death books and cozy fantasies, and then obviously I sprinkle in some smutty fantasy romance in there as well, because we need to be balanced, okay? We have a Cambridge professor, her name is Emily Wilde, and she journeys to a small town in the far north to study fairy folklore and discovers dark fae magic, friendship, and love. She's good at research, she's not good at people, she doesn't have a lot of close friends, she doesn't get invited to parties, she keeps to herself basically, and she loves her research. She prefers the company of her books, her dog, and the fairy folk, which honestly so relatable. But there's a new arrival in the town, and it happens to be her insufferable rival, whose name is Wendell Bamblebee, who manages to charm the townsfolk and get in the middle of Emily's research, utterly confound and frustrates her. Also, another super cozy fantasy is Legends and Lattes. I feel like everybody and their mother has read this book except for me, and I'm out of the cool kids club and I want to be in the cool kids cozy fantasy club. It does have a plot, so it's not no plot and all vibes. It does have a plot. I think it's fairly low stakes. Viv is a battle-weary orc who just wants to settle down, hang up her sword, and start the first coffee shop in a town. It's also pretty short as well. I think it's close to or just under 300 pages. My last Libby hold is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. All I needed to know about this book was that it's basically a Slytherin type romance, and I was like, oh my gosh, say less, I'm so there. I read Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller this summer for Once Upon a Readathon and loved her writing style. It's YA fantasy romance, but it is so much fun to read. In this book we follow Alessandra, and her goal is to infiltrate and woo the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him and take over his kingdom. Let's go baddie queen. It's kind of giving Bridge Kingdom vibes, you know what I mean? People say he can command shadows. They talk to him. He's like all knowledgeable. His shadows find out all of his secrets and then like gossip in his ear and tell him everything that's going on. But Alessandra is not the only one trying to kill the king. So she finds herself trying to keep him alive during these attempts on his life so that she can be the one to do it. Now we're gonna go on to my Kindle Unlimited TBR. This first one, I'm returning to a list that I made at the beginning of the year, my 23 books for 2023, all of which were 5-star predictions, and this book was on it. It's a dragon book, Mortal Blade, and it's by Christopher Mitchell. I think that this book is a dual POV, so we have one character whose name is Korthi. He was stolen from his home. He's now in the city of Eternal Siege, which is ruled by these temperamental, not the best gods, and they're forcing him to fight alongside the Blades. The Blades are basically the military, the protectors of the city. They're protecting the city from hordes of monstrous greenhides. I don't know what greenhides are. I'm assuming they're dragons. It kind of sounds like dragons, but I'm unsure of what they actually are. And then our second POV is Maddie Jackdaw. She is a young Blade, but she's on the outs. She's facing her last chance. And if she doesn't embrace her new role, she's going to be put in this company called the Rats. Basically, they're a facet of the Blades, I believe, who don't have to defend the city. They actually have to go outside of the city and face the perilous tasks outside of the Great Walls. So there's like less protection because they're not in the city and they have to do all these things, and it sounds very, very dangerous. So she doesn't want to go in the Rats. She wants to take advantage of this last chance that she has to stay within the Blades, but doing so is causing her to face her darkest fears, for beneath the walls in a secret hidden lair is a dragon who is imprisoned and waiting. And the tagline for this book is a city ruled by gods, a mortal champion, a misfit girl, and a disobedient dragon. And that just sounds amazing. Completely different vibe. Don't think it could be more different. Is A Lady of Rooksgrove Manor, and this is by Catherine Moon. So many of my friends have read this book and told me that I need to read it. It is a spicy monster book, and I think that's what I need, you know? We talked about balance. That's why I have this mug here, because some of these books, they're gonna be spicy. I think they're gonna be a good time. A lot of them are on the darker side because we're going into autumn and I want to embrace the monster books. I want to embrace the darker fantasy romance books. So this is one of those. Our main character is Esther. She is a maid and she is at risk of losing her job. So her final straw, final opportunity is to go to Rooksgrove Manor, which doesn't have a great reputation. The invitation comes from a handsome Dr. Underwood, a delicate gentleman with a ferocious alter ego who knows exactly what he wants from Esther. It's giving Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There are rules to be followed, expectations to be met, and Esther is afraid she might be too wicked, even for a place like Rook's Grave. Oh, I said the title wrong. Rook's Grave Manor, not Rook's Grove Manor.
Tomato.
Temptations lurk around every shadowy corner, and Esther has never been a girl able to resist. I hope she doesn't. I hope that she doesn't. Next up is a book called The Unmarked Witch by Miranda Lynn. I thought this book sounded really interesting because the magic system, or at least the witches in their culture, it's tied to tattoos. So depending on the spells you cast and your magic, witches have all tattoos, which I think is pretty cool. And our main character's name is Raven, but she is unmarked. She doesn't have tattoos. I think that is having an impact on her self-esteem, it seems like. But then it says that the fact that she is unmarked has nothing to do with her potential, with her powers. The description says, all Raven wants is peace, but in a magical realm plagued by deception, the only thing her world knows is turmoil. A land where witches wear their spells like tattoos is no place for a woman without a single magical mark, except for Raven, whose unblemished skin contradicts the truth of her power. There seems to be an evil Dark King, and the Dark King's men end up killing Raven's grandmother, and they start these witch trials where they're persecuting witches. Raven is fighting to survive. She's kind of making her way through this very tumultuous time, but the journey quickly descends into perils far greater than she'd ever imagined, including a war on her heart from a man she'd only ever known as a villain. This is new adult/adult, so it is going to have some spicy scenes in it. I think it's really interesting. If anything, I think the magic system sounds very different from other witchy books that I've read, so I was intrigued right from the very beginning. Next up on my KU TBR is Hellfire by Marielle Pomeroy. This is a dark romance, like a dark fantasy romance book. It says to check the trigger warnings before you start it, so I think there's CNC in this one. Main character is Ahia. It says she finds herself stained by more blood than she can hide, so I don't know if that means she has kind of a morally gray history. She escapes her realm, but she pays the price by giving up her immortality, and then she takes it a step further and she ends up trading her soul 7 days in the devil's realm. And the devil's realm is called Nephilim, ruled by Arioch. All of these terms, 70% chance that I'm getting them correct. Or Arioch? Maybe it's Arioch. That sounds so much better. Arioch is eager to dangle his new pet in front of Mithra. Questionable of who that is. Maybe his ex-lover? Who knows? The pull between them is all-consuming. They crave each other between sharp words and angry exchanges in an increasingly passionate bond that threatens to shatter the delicate balance of everything. This sounds like a crazy wild ride, and that's what I'm in for. I'm not expecting like a literary experience by any means. It just sounds kind of unhinged, and I want to see like what the deal is. Next up is Black Sunshine by Karina Hale. Another book that I know a lot of people have read and really enjoyed. This is a vampire fantasy romance. Specifically, Jan read this and she gave it 5 stars, and it was in her top 10 books of 2022. I trust Jan. I find that Jan is kind of a hard critic, but when I read top rated picks from Jan, they never disappoint. And so I'm so curious to read this book because I feel that she can be even more harsh on fantasy romance specifically, so we'll see. I know that she loves vampires, so maybe that had something to play into it, and they're done really well in this book. But we follow Lenore and we meet her on her 21st birthday. All she wants to do is hang out with her friends, finish her second year at Berkeley with flying colors, and maybe catch the eye of a hot musician playing a show at a club that she can now legally get into. A week before her birthday, the vampire kidnaps her. He has cold eyes and a lethal touch. He's been stalking her on the San Francisco's fog-shrouded streets. He's caught between wanting to kill Lenore and save her, but you see, Lenore too is a vampire. Okay, so we get a plot twist in the synopsis of the book. She's also a vampire that's squeamish around blood. This sounds so interesting. I can't wait to see what all the hype is about. I really hope that I scream and cry and throw up about it. And my last Kindle Unlimited book is another cozy fantasy. It's called The Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. This is the first book in the Wimbrel House series. I talked about this book recently in a video. I think it was my most recent fantasy romance recommendations video. This is a book that takes place in New England, and I love books that take place in New England because that's where I grew up, and also it's a book about a house, which I also tend to really love. This takes place in Rhode Island in 1846. Merritt Fernsby is very surprised when he inherits a remote estate on Narragansett Bay. And even though this is a decrepit, worn down home, it hasn't been inhabited in a really long time, like centuries, more than a century, he's just ready to move in and call it home. So go off, King, love that for you. Wimbrel House is not about to let Merritt leave, ever. Enter Huldah Larkin of the Boston Institute for the Keeping of Enchanted Rooms, and she has been trained in taming such structures. So we have a temperamental, magical house. We also have a grumpy main character who inherited this estate. And then we have Huldah, who's just coming in to try to help the situation. And I think that Huldah, I want to say Hilda, but it's Huldah and Merritt grow closer through the investigation process. And it just sounds so cute and so cozy, also kind of spooky. I hope that the house gives kind of like spooky vibes at first. It seems extremely atmospheric and it sounded really cute. So we're gonna give it a try. And now we're gonna go into my physical TBR. I have 6 books on my physical TBR, some of which I've ordered. I pre-ordered 2 of these. I can't wait for them. But we'll start with the books that I actually already have. So I have been meaning to read Vicious and Vengeful by V.E. Schwab for a very, very long time. I've had these books on my shelves for, let's call it 2 years. It might be closer to 3. I've heard that these give dark academia vibes. I think what discouraged me from picking up this duology is that I've heard the first one's really good, the second one isn't as good, and that started to make me, I don't know why, like scared to pick up the series. I love V.E. Schwab's writing so much that even if the second one like isn't as good, I feel like I'm still really going to enjoy it. In these books, we follow college roommates who are super, super smart, but I think they kind of get into like a competition-y type mode with each other, like almost rivals, but they're working on the same thing. So we follow Victor and Eli. They started as college roommates, brilliant, arrogant, lonely boys who recognized the same sharpness and ambition in each other. Their senior year, they're sharing a research project. In adrenaline, near-death experiences, and seemingly supernatural events, and that reveals an intriguing possibility that under the right conditions, someone could develop extraordinary abilities. But when their thesis moves from academic to the experimental, things start to go wrong. I might try to get the audiobooks for these if I can find them on Libby as well. Next up we have Heavenly Bodies. This is a book that's on Kindle Unlimited, but I did order a physical copy because it's a book I've had my eye on for the last like month. It's a fantasy romance that follows gods, but in this book the gods are called stars and it's giving super celestial vibes. I've also heard that our main character, our main girly pop, is a shadow mommy, and that's something that I absolutely need in my life. Alara has been given kind of a prophecy. She's been given a fate that she will fall in love with a star and it will be to both of their demise. So they're both like destined to die after they fall in love. A god descends to wreak havoc on Alara's kingdom and she's forced to flee into an enemy territory. Her enemy has to train her to be able to protect herself, and something dark brews within her, a power made of night and shadows. So I think she realizes, and she comes into her power and she realizes that she can control darkness and shadows, and I freaking love that so much. This is a book that's currently one of our options for our September book pick for the Who Did This To You book club. That is a fantasy romance book club that I run on the app called Fable. We are still voting on our September pick, but it's leaning very heavily towards Heavenly Bodies. I was gonna read it regardless of whether it was our book pick or not, but if you'd like to join us, that info is always linked in the description box below. And then we're going to end with the 2 books that I have pre-ordered. So this first book comes out September 19th, and it's called A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. Our main character, her name is Effie, and she has always had a love for fairy tales. And not only a love, she is haunted by these dreams ever since she's young of this fairy king. And she could only find solace from these dreams/nightmares by reading from her favorite author. We meet her when she's in adulthood. She's at this prestigious college learning architecture, but she gets the opportunity to participate in a competition to design the late author's house. So like renovate, redo her favorite author's home. Heraeth Manor is an impossible task, a musty, decrepit estate on the brink of crumbling into a hungry sea. When Effie arrives, she finds she isn't the only one who's made a temporary home there. Preston, who is a stodgy young literature student, is studying her favorite author's papers and work and is determined to prove her favorite author is a fraud. As the 2 rival students investigate the reclusive author's legacy, piecing together clues through his letters, books, and diaries, they discover that the house's foundation isn't the only thing that can't be trusted. So like, there's a lot going on here. I don't know how the fairy king is gonna come into play and why she's being haunted by dreams of a fairy king, but it's supposed to be really gothic. I think it has elements of the paranormal. It kind of borders on, it's very fantastical. Like, it's basically a young adult fantasy romance, but there are some mystery thriller like aspects to it that I can't wait to get to. It seems very similar to All the Dead Lie Down, which I read recently. That was also a very gothic YA romance that had paranormal elements to it, and this seems very similar. And then the last book on this list that I pre-ordered on my physical TBR is called The September House by Carissa Orlando. This is a book that I found very recently that Kristen from Kristen Craves Books talked about in one of her videos. So thank you so much, Kristen. Immediately I was like, absolutely, I need to read that. So this book comes out September 5th. It's supposed to be a horror, a paranormal horror. We have Margaret and her husband Hal. They just bought their dream home. They literally love it so much, except September rolls around and the house comes alive and all of the past residents come back as ghosts to visit our besties, Margaret and Hal. They bought a large Victorian house on Hawthorne Street for sale at a surprisingly reasonable price. Oh my gosh, I totally wonder why. But then they discovered the hauntings. Every September, the walls drip blood. The ghosts of former inhabitants appear, and all of them are terrified of something that lurks in the basement. Absolutely not. I love creepy houses. As you can tell from actually a couple other books that are on this list, I love cozy fantasies that have crazy things happening with houses. I love when houses add to the atmosphere of a book. So I find that when there's spooky, creepy, haunted houses, I'm there. That is my September TBR, my friends. I hope that you found some good recommendations. If you're planning on reading any of these, please let me know. If you've already read any of these, please let me know in the comments down below. I will catch you in the comments and I will see you in my next one, friends. Bye.